Well, welcome here, everybody. We're going to be doing some interesting introductions this morning. So a lot of us have new roles or shifting roles as we head into the fall. So it'd be good to introduce ourselves again. So my name's Bradley Jersak, and I'm currently, since May 1st, the principal at SSU now, and I'm still director of the Theology and Culture program. We also have Andrew Klager. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Let us know your role, how you fit in this world, and then we'll just go through the faculty and staff who are here first.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Andrew Klager. I'm the new provost at SSU, and I'm still the director of the newly named Jim Forrest Institute for Religion, Peace, and Justice. Yeah, I don't know if.
I think now is a timely moment for you just to share about the Jim Forrest Institute and what we're about and the name change and all of that.
Sure. Anything? Yeah. So the Jim Forrest Institute, this was so IRPJ, the Institute for Religion, Peace, and Justice, has been running programs for about 5 years, and so we focus on the peace and justice programs at SSU. So that includes the Certificate in Religion, Peace, and Justice, as well as an MA and an MTS in Peace and Justice with different tracks on the inner transformation, as well as on reconciling with Indigenous peoples and the Palestinian context. And so in January, we started exploring renaming IRPJ after Jim Forrest, who is or was an author and peace activist who died about a year and a few months ago. And so he was a good friend of mine, a mentor, and so we approached his widow Nancy and asked for her blessing to name IRPJ after Jim Forrest. And so Jim was somebody, if you go to the website jfi.ssu.ca, there's a section on Jim that gives a brief account of his remarkable life. And so he was connected and good friends with and worked with like Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. Henry Nouwen was his spiritual guide for a while. The Berrigan brothers, Daniel and Phil, and Thich Nhat Hanh was really his, I would say, his main mentor in his life. And so he really embodies and exhibits what the Jim Forrest Institute is all about, particularly the inner transformation of a peacemaker. And so we thought it was very fitting to name the Institute after him after he passed away. And so that's what we did and announced that, I believe, about a month ago. And so here we are.
Thanks, Andrew. Now I'll have my sidekick in the Theology and Culture department, the guy who poached me for SSU in the first place. Pete Fitch, would you introduce yourself and share where you're at and coming into this fall?
Peter Fitch, and I'm continuing to teach in historical theology, and just very excited about the program as it's developing. I love the new website that Andrew has. Just, it's a labor of love for Andrew, but I'm so proud of it. So we're coming into a new phase where it feels as though here's someone trying to get in. There's Sarah, I think.
Yeah, I got her.
Oh, okay. So we're coming into this new phase, and it feels as though the struggles of the last few years for SSU to identify itself have come into this place of resonance. And so this is a fitting celebration today as we honor graduates, but it feels as though we have an important theological message to share with the world, and we'll try to do that.
Thanks, Peter. Walter?
So I guess, yeah, my shifts are fairly slight. I guess I think my new titles are Professor of Counseling Psychology and Operations Coordinator. which we'll see what kind of things that can mean as we go ahead into the future. But glad to be here for this event today.
Walter, can you say a little bit just about what's emerging from in terms of reconciliation studies? What is that for those who haven't heard at all?
So yeah, it was started on a real fast track last year as a program that was done a little bit between the models for the IRPJ certificate and the theology and culture module. So it had some elements of both. It was a certificate program. It is a certificate program. And we started with a module here in person, partly land-based on a Baskin-Magadi camp just north of St. Stephen. So we worked with our own teachers as well as a holistic way couple to teach 3 courses. Lawrence taught, I taught, Andy Wood taught with me. We had a nice small group as well as a cluster of our own undergrads that took the courses in the first time around. And this fall, coming up for the first time, we're going to be doing a learning tour up to James Bay. As well as practica. And so that'll be continuing, possibly with slightly different shapes in the years to come. It's been a very exciting program. Received, it's the kind of thing that has to be done fairly sensitively after months of consulting with Indigenous friends and scholars, and so far it's been received with a lot of enthusiasm. So it's been a good road.
Very good. Thank you, Walter. And now the freshest doctor in the house, Lawrence, could you share a little bit about what you do at SSU, but also the landmark you've just passed?
Absolutely. Thank you, Bradley. Yeah, I am zooming in from St. Stephen. I just returned from the Netherlands, where I am originally from, hence the odd accent. I am currently still, according to my contract, an assistant professor of history at SSU, but that changes come September. Then I'm an assistant professor in political philosophy, which is what my PhD is in. So in a sense, that is also a homecoming to something that's a bit more at the core of my expertise. Well, although I'm a historian and a philosopher, I'm a historian of ideas and culture, which is close to philosophy, and I'm particularly a historian of political culture. And yeah, I just finished my PhD, which is very exciting, which is very fresh on my mind. And I'm glad to have a big bunch of writing done. And I'm very excited about teaching in the coming semesters and taking up that part again.
Yeah, this fall he'll be teaching a super important course to the school, which is transcending spectrum ideology. It's how we come out of the culture wars and stay engaged in the work of justice. And Lawrence is both an academic in that regard, but also a practitioner. So we're really grateful. Well, without further ado, I want to just name some of the I want to name our graduates, many of who for variety of reasons couldn't join us today, but and we're going to hear from some of them later. So first of all, in the Master of Ministries program, finishing up now, is Carl Andrew Betcher. And I want to say I've known you for years, but I never feel secure about my pronunciation. Carl, did I get it close?
You did very well. Oh, it's right on.
Okay, thank you. Robert or Bob Easley Branch. And I didn't know Krista had this many names. Krista Selena Marie Hyde. Barbara J. Dowling Lewis. Heather Payne Reynolds. Perry L. Zond. Sarah Howe O'Brien, zooming in from across the ocean today. And in the Master of Arts program, James D. Gerber, Michael C. McDougall, Lisa Meyer, and J. Stephen Mitchinson. And so congratulations to all of these. When the names began rolling in, we were really gratified to see how many were coming in for a landing, and we're so grateful for all of you. And it's been transformative for us to get to know these students and become friends with them. dear friends. And so thank you for those who are able to come and join us today. I'd like now to turn it over to L.A. Henry. I didn't introduce her yet, but maybe L.A., if you could introduce yourself first, but also mention David and the course you teach together, and then we'll have you slide right into your talk.
Well, that's just great. I'm so glad to get to go first. My name's L.A. Henry, and I am a co-instructor with Reverend David Moore on a course entitled Racial and Gender Justice for the 21st Century. We each co-teach half of one module course. I've done it, I think, twice, and I will be doing it again this October. My background is that I taught at St. Stephen's University for 12 years in literature and really loved it. That's really my first love. And then became a lawyer. I am currently a lawyer. So I'm not teaching exactly within any specific area of expertise, but I feel very honored to continue to be asked to participate in the SSU Masters in Ministry program this way. And I was asked to give a speech. So that's what I'm going to do now. Oh, just Reverend David Moore, if you don't know, he's in Santa Barbara, California, and he's a quite well-renowned speaker and pastor within the Black African-American community in the United States, and increasingly in Canada too. So it's with great pleasure that I congratulate this year's graduates of the Masters of Arts in Theology and Culture program, the Masters of Ministry students, and those who completed their master's program through the Jim Forrest Institute of Online Courses. I thank our principal, Dr. Bradley Jerzak, for the honor of speaking to you here today, and wish to acknowledge our Provost and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Andrew Klager. Special thanks to the members of our Board of Directors for the volunteer hours they invest in the oversight of St. Stephen's University, helping to make it the best that it can be. So I'm going to do a share screen now. Okay. St. Stephen's University, St. Stephen's University is founded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Pescataway tribes, and the nation signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. We encourage you to think about the traditional land on which you gather with us today, and to reflect on what work we can all do to breathe life into our obligations to those communities and those realities. Today is a very special day. It is special because it marks the accomplishment of an educational milestone for our graduates. It is also special because it is the first resonance ceremony under St. Stephen's University's new mission as a School of Graduate Studies. The graduate students graduating today were drawn to study at SSU because they wanted a different kind of graduate education than one typically gets at a seminary or university. They wanted one which not only stretches students' theological assumptions, but also on social and interpersonal assumptions, head and heart. They wanted to learn within a community which seeks to develop graduates who can be present in the world, in their worlds, with a greater vision for peace, justice, reconciliation, and love. Today, I wish to reflect on qualities that SSU offers its students that go beyond conventional academic learning. So conveniently, I've heard it's a good thing to do this. I've structured the speech alliteratively around 4 M's. We'll call it the 4 M's of ministry, or mastery, if you prefer: mystery, margins, meeting, and meaning. Last weekend, I attended the Living Roots Music Festival in Fredericton, New Brunswick. I was introduced to the music of Canadian singer-songwriter Kelly Loader and was struck by their lyrics. We get high on what we don't know. We get higher the lower that we go. Just when you think you're done, there will always be another marvelous mystery beneath the sea. The sea, a metaphor for the unconscious mind, a metaphor for divine mystery. SSU has always made space for its students to explore the experience of mystery in their spirituality, without holding rigidly to doctrinal expectations on how that experience is to be named or explained. SSU has valued individuals' experience of the high of engaging with the divine. The sea always has more treasures, and it is only through surrender that we go deeper and paradoxically higher. In the ministry program, students have an opportunity to engage with Ignatian spirituality as a contemplative discipline. Students study mystics and explore how their experience was transformative through suffering co-joined with love. In the Truth and Reconciliation stream, students are taught indigenous forms of spiritual practice which open new doors to the experience of mystery. When we think we are done, there will always be another marvelous mystery beneath the sea. The sea is also a space of profound vulnerability. As humans, we are physically very vulnerable. We need air. Our bodies are not those of marine mammals. So no matter how well we swim, in the sea, we are inherently surrendered and vulnerable. On land, we can construct boundaries that are both protective and exclusionary. In the sea, we are all equal. This leads me to the second M, which is margins. In earlier days, this vision tended toward, SSU's vision has always held a passion for those on the margins. Some would call this solidarity with the poor. However, the manifestation of this vision has evolved over time. In earlier days, this vision tended toward a unidirectional flow. White Western Christianity and culture was entrusted by God with the spiritual, material, and intellectual wealth to offer to its own poor and those of other nations. But this vision has significantly shifted, particularly in the last decade, by the growing social recognition that many within our societies, locally and globally, have been pushed to the margins by those who hold the wealth. The language around this recognition, seeing that some folks are privileged and others have been excluded based upon identities constructed on power, has taken root in our hearts and minds, and we cannot unknow what we now know. In his book, Making America Great Again, Fairy Tale, Horror Story, Dream Come True, Reverend David Moore writes this: Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." This tells me to search first for those who have been mistreated first. What I admire so much about the Black Lives Matter movement is that there's recognition and honoring first of those lives that have historically been hidden and shunned, even among African Americans. Transgender women, even cisgender women that have never been given their due. My generation loves to cite Martin and Malcolm, and rightly so, but Angela Davis shone as brightly. She was as brilliant as anyone involved in the freedom movement and still is. If we are searching for those who have been mistreated first, we will find children. We will find the disabled. We will find prisoners. Jesus's words, "Whatsoever you do to the least of these, that you do to me," have fresh resonance today. SSU's faculty and students are turning towards those whom the church has historically considered shameful. But it is exactly in those most vulnerable to shaming that we meet mystery at the margins. In her book, Queer Virtue, Reverend Elizabeth Edmonds locates the heart of Christianity in scandal. She writes, "The epicenter of Christian scandal is that cross. What happens to Jesus is so bad. People who are scandalized respond by shaming. So it wasn't enough to kill him. The political and religious leadership of occupied Palestine had to humiliate him, to snuff out his life like a cigarette butt under your shoe on a filthy street. This is what scandalized people do. This is what scandalous people take on." She goes on to quote St. Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth, where he proclaims Christ crucified a stumbling block, scandalon, to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. What is this wisdom? What is this power? It is in the cruciform Jesus that where no one gets left to the margins. God himself in Jesus becomes the scandal, and in so many ways continues to be a scandal and a stumbling block because of the way the church has claimed and abused power. But for those who are most vulnerable, the cruciform Christ is the embodiment of God's embracing and accepting of all. In the sea of mystery, there are no survivors if all are not saved. The third M is meeting. At the heart of SSU, there's always been a sense of community, of accountability, vulnerability, sharing, living together in a simple and often poor lifestyle where every student can be validated for the gifts that they brought to the community, where everyone is seen and needed. As with SSU's evolution around understanding the marginalized, so SSU grew and evolved in understanding how it had historically succeeded and fallen short in regard to being a safe space of genuine meeting for every community member. In 2015, Field Notes, a collected memoir on Canada's smallest university, was published. The editorial committee included faculty, Dr. Greg Finley, Dr. Agnes Kramer-Hamstra, Dr. Walter Thiessen, alumna Patricia Coates and Katie Gorey, with interviews conducted by alumni Matt Fries and Leland Mertz. Reaching back to SSU's earliest days, the students, alumni, faculty, and staff were invited to speak to their SSU experience. The result is a beautiful memoir in words of those interviewed. It is real, it is raw, and unwilling to shrink from the truth about that third M, meeting. Recorded history is always vulnerable to power imbalances. We only have to look at colonial history to see the erasure of Indigenous voices, Black voices, LGBTQ2SIA+ voices. The temptation is to create narratives that gloss over the scandalous bits, the shameful bits, the sinful bits, and to highlight that which was loving, life-giving, and successful. But SSU's faculty and alumni did not do that. They did not control the narrative or erase the voices of those whose experience at SSU left them feeling unseen or unmet. All who wished to be were included in the field notes. This foundation is at the heart of the graduate studies program, where genuine meeting is concomitant with community. Academia can be a minefield of pretense, elitism, perfectionism, everything the cruciform Jesus points away from. To be able to create an academic community that embraces its failures as well as its successes is a truly rare and special place. To be able to cherish all while delving into studies that seek to shine light on the pain points of human existence is a remarkable endeavor. Which leads me to my fourth and final M in ministry, meaning. In Falling Upwards, Richard Rohr states, humans are creators of meaning, and finding deep meaning in our experiences is not just another name for spirituality, but it is the meaning of human happiness. One of the sheer joys of academic pursuit is discovering one's capacity to make meaning, to connect dots in life-giving ways that open up new understanding. And I'm going to take a moment and turn to the theses and research paper that this group of graduates has done. I realize they're going to speak on it later, so I'm being a little bit presumptuous here, but I was just so struck by the titles. So this is simply a reading of the titles. So we have Menstrual Blood, an iconic of the canonic atonement of Christ, A Better Way with Better Blood by Lisa Meyer. Reframing Life and Death as Dying and Rebirth, The Passion of Christ Reveals the Fullness of Humanity by J. Stephen Mitchinson. So here we have a deep dive into mystery of God's love for our embodied selves in blood, in death, in birth, in rebirth. Then we have a comparative study of James Cone's Black Liberation Theology and Naim Atik's Palestinian Liberation Theology by Michael McDougall. Liberation theology looks to the margins and the marginalized to shine a lens on injustice. And we have a collective call to individual action, Soren Kierkegaard, An Authentic Community in Christendom by James Gerber, and Exercises for Mentoring Young Leaders for Conversation, Dialogue, and Discovery over Coffee. Both examples of meeting and how faith manifests itself in our collective care for one another. And for those Masters of Ministry graduates who did not do a thesis, Carl, Andrew, Betcher, Christus, Lena Marie, Heidi, Barbara J. Dowling Lewis, Sarah Howell O'Brien, Heather Payne Reynolds, and Perry Alzand, your journey is equally engaged in the human happiness of making meaning from your experience at SSU. And the making of meaning is ongoing. Today, we celebrate how, going forward, you will touch the lives of those who need inclusion, hope, reconciliation, peace, and justice. Each situation that challenges you is a magical opportunity to ask questions of yourself regarding the 4 M's. Am I meeting mystery at a deeper level? Am I touching a margin in myself or in another that needs my focused regard? Am I failing to meet someone, or is that person failing to meet me? And if so, what meaning can I find in that for myself within the context of the cruciform? St. Paul states, if we die in Christ, we shall live in Christ. Just living, and just living, means we have to suffer. There is no avoiding the scandal of the cross. But just when we think we are drowning, we get higher the lower that we go. We will always be met, we will always be caught, and we will never drown. The meaning you have made through your studies at SSU is just such a deep dive into the joyous sea of mystery, because there will always be another marvelous mystery beneath the sea, carrying you as you enter the next chapter of your ministries.
Thank you, LA. That was magnificent. I appreciate the heart and the work that you not only put into that speech, but also your work with us. And we wouldn't be who we are without you. And as LA knows, she's, in terms of her practice of these things in the real world, my own family has been a tremendous beneficiary and experienced reconciliation through her voice, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much, Bradley. And I just have to say, it is just such a thrill and privilege to continue to be part of this group. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to, in a moment, we're going to hand it over then to Perry Zahn to give a student's address. I'd like to give a somewhat extensive introduction to her. The students, of course, who have been in her cohort know her quite well, but a few of the things I want to say, Perry and I have been dear friends for a very long time. And it's delightful to have somebody who, along with her husband, Brian, has been co-pastoring a mega church with the very ideals that we're espousing here in a way that they recognized would be costly and has been. You can read about it in Brian's memoir, Water to Wine, where they transitioned a church from where they were in that, very politicized faith in America. They stood up to that, and I'll go so far as to say endured not only 1,000 people leaving over it, and yet they remained faithful, but even death threats and things like that. In this world, these are the kind of things that Perry and Brian face to be faithful. And so part of their faithfulness has also been serving us in really profound ways. So Perry's not only graduating with a Master of Ministry, she's also led some of our travel modules when students were unable to do a travel module, the standard ones that the Fitches were leading, and that was shut down through COVID, and we weren't able to put those together. Our students were able to fulfill travel module requirements by going with Perry to Israel, Palestine, and really seeing on the ground a kind of the realities there that weren't just propaganda tourism. And so they, along with Mercy, another one of our students who's with us, have been central to that. And then, what else to say? I think maybe I just won't say a lot more for now. It's time for Perry to take the floor.
Thanks, Brad. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time, and it's just great to be here once again, one last time with my fellow students, professors, and the friends that are gathered too. In February of 2020, just a little over 3 years ago, I learned about the St. Stephen's University Master's Program in Theology and Culture. I learned about it on a hike with my dear friend, Brad. There were several of us there, and I knew that very day that this was something I was going to do. There was no question. Now, the 2-week residencies each semester in beautiful New Brunswick, Canada, sounded incredible, but they were not the primary draw, which is a good thing, because I did not know in February 2020, nor did any of you, that our lives were all getting ready to massively change with what my 5-year-old granddaughter would call the Crayola virus. And so when I started my St. Stephen's journey in September of 2020, the residencies had been quickly converted to weekly Saturday Zoom marathons. And I applaud the staff of SSU for so successfully making this change. I will underscore the use of the word marathon because 4 solid hours of lectures and discussion was intense, but possible. 5 would have been too much. I'm also grateful that for my time zone, the sessions were from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I want to salute those in my cohort who didn't have such agreeable times, like Sarah in New Zealand, who got up at 3 a.m. Sunday mornings to sit in the fog. And Sarah's here today. Hey, Sarah, are you going back to bed? I suggest you do. I quickly grew to love and look forward to the Zoom sessions. I called them my COVID consolation. And they were a consolation, providing stimulation and camaraderie during a period of much less human connection than we were all accustomed to. I honestly loved all the teachers and all the classes. I felt that all the instructors were personally invested in seeing each student succeed in the program. The degree is church history intensive, which I also greatly appreciated. Of course, there was a lot of reading to be done. And every semester, we all had to climb Fitch Mountain again, which is what we affectionately called Peter's reading list. As with all mountains, there were some long slogs, but a great satisfaction when we finally reached the summit and realized what a well-curated reading list he had put together and what a greater understanding we had of the various periods of church history. And I thoroughly enjoyed researching and writing all my papers, except for the periods, sometimes lasting several days or even weeks, when I ranted and raved, wondering if I had lost my mind, thinking there was no way I could pull all the information together into a paper I could feel good about. So maybe I should just quit and drop out. Eventually, though, I would progress to the point where I decided to just write something, anything, get it over with, and hand it in. That was progress because somehow it took the pressure off. I'd work at it a few more days, and suddenly something would click, and like magic would come together, a paper I was genuinely proud of and eager to share. This happened for almost every major paper I wrote. In the end, I never handed in a paper I wasn't proud of, and I frequently refer back to them. And I'm so surprised to realize that I'm not tired of the topics, but instead I want to go deeper and learn more. A big motivation for me in doing the degree was to read some important books that are foundational to my Christian faith that I knew I would never read unless I was forced to. I did that, and I'm very grateful to have gained the knowledge I did. I was also happy to be done and to swear I would never again read another academic book. But I'm well aware that the things I read are still very much with me. I I have a sense that they created a layer of bedrock underneath my largely 20th century Christian foundation, that I'm better anchored, that I also have stronger wings to fly. And despite my great relief and my resolve at never having to read another academic book, I'm still reading them. I just finished one 2 weeks ago that I can't quit thinking about or talking about. So I want to give a shout out to a great female woman theologian, and this is her magnus opus, Cheryl Bridges Johns, Re-enchanting the Text, Discovering the Bible as Sacred, Mysterious, and Dangerous. Why am I reading these books? 1, because I want to, and 2, because I can. The SSU program stretched me and I grew. Now, some could question, and some did, why I would undertake such a program at my age and what I plan to do with my degree. First of all, I'm not geriatric yet. But to answer both, I would say that I believe life goes on after we close our eyes for the last time in this existence. And this belief undergirds the way I live on a daily basis. I will carry the enrichment of this program with me for all eternity. I still have not made it to New Brunswick. I hope that someday I will. It's been a joy to meet many that I Zoomed with in real life, especially several who've gone to the Holy Land with us, both the trips that my husband Brian and I lead together, but also the women's trips I've led the last 2 years with my friend and SSU classmate Mercy Aiken. I not only gained a solid education, I met a lot of wonderful people. I am exceedingly grateful for the program, and I will continue to recommend it wherever I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. We really appreciate your work as an ambassador for the school. This is my chance to ask all of you to consider how you might fulfill that role yourselves. We are, of course, always looking for new students. Recruiting is a thing. You can't make someone sign up, but they're far more likely to if Sarah O'Brien takes you on a hike in New Brunswick along with your friends, and you have a chance to say something about the kind of things we're doing. And so that's really precious to us. We appreciate it. We'll use this moment to also say if you know of donors who would like to contribute to this kind of cause and the fruitful outcomes that we see in our students, then please send them our way. We now also have some time to have a couple of our MA students share what they would like to, how they summarize their thesis. I know James shared his in person at SSU at the convocation. Michael McDougall can't be with us today. But he's a good example of someone who, before even finalizing his graduation, was accepted into a doctoral program with in international studies. But we do have Lisa Meyer with us today. We have Steve Mitchinson with us today. Interestingly, they both have somewhat a medical angle on their thesis, and yet both deeply rooted in what we'll call the tradition, and how a theme of kenosis as self-giving love permeates a lot of our work. And so I'd love for Lisa to have the final word on it. So we're going to go first of all to Steve. Can you share a bit about your thesis with us, and don't forget to pitch your book as well.
I thought as you were leading into Lisa there, I was going to get to go second. There you go. Thanks, Brent. So good to see all your faces again. Just somewhat, I would echo everything that Perry said about this program. You know, this was it started, I think the whole thing began in February, March of 2020, and as the world was about to be turned upside down, and yet we those 4-hour sessions on a Saturday morning were both beautiful and challenging, and I'm so grateful for this program and everything it's given me. People have asked me since, how has it changed you? What was the outcome? And it's very difficult to put into words, but I think, LA, what you were saying about mystery and meeting and, the margins, mystery is, I think I've realized how much I don't know, how much I'd like to know, how much I possibly never will, what is the limits of human insight, very profound and something that I'll carry with me, as Perry says, for the rest of my life and into eternity. And I guess, the outcome, one of the outcomes was, I think it made me a better doctor, which I work in palliative medicine for those that don't know. And, I think just my love of humanity and the beauty of humanity has made my work with people approaching the end of life so much more profound and life-giving, in a paradoxical kind of way. What to say about the thesis? It felt in a way that, this was a moment where I was able to bring my, this theology training and, all of my life to this point and my medical world into sort of one place. And the title, as was mentioned, Reframing Life and Death as Dying and Rebirth, the Passion of Christ reveals the fullness of humanity. I guess probably the easiest thing to do is just to maybe just read the abstract. And and as Brad said, I guess you could go on and read the book, which I'll show you at the end of it. So the abstract says this: have we truly understood how life is intended to be a preparation for our physical death? What if death is something to be embraced, not avoided? A journey where we practice dying in stages until we're reborn from the womb of this life in which we grow. I will compare this proposition with my own observations as a palliative care physician. I will demonstrate how, through his incarnation and passion, Jesus reveals that to be fully human necessarily includes death. Through his physical death, he reveals himself as God, the ultimate kenosis, completing the work of creation with his final breath. It is finished. It is this image of God in which we are created. We are invited into this death by putting on Christ through the sacrament of baptism, to take up our cross and embrace a martyr's life, to fully live and be reborn. I will explore concepts of a good life and a good death in the context of the Passion of Christ and what a union with the source of all life through the cross might mean. Death is defeated and transformed from a terminal destination into the birth canal to true humanity. To demonstrate this, I will undertake a critical analysis of the theology and some of the conceptual missteps in our Western culture reflected in modern palliative care. I will explore these themes with my interlocutors, including Basil the Great, John Baer, Ernest Becker, Richard Beck, and others from the fields of theology, psychology, anthropology, and medicine under the following headings: 1, definitions and meanings, words of life; 2, cruciform life, death in life; 3, resurrection life, life in death; and finally 4, rebirth in death. To die is perhaps the most human thing we will ever do. I intend to reframe this concept and transpose the associated learning into how we live and how we practice palliative medicine. So that's what I attempted to do, and did finish, and with so thank you to everybody who contributed to this journey. Thank you to Peter and to Brad, who are my 2 readers, and Brad too, who helped to form this into a book, which is entitled "Dying for Life," and as I say, as a plug, available on Amazon, if you care to read it. Yeah, what else to say? I mean, I feel like this is, it's the end of one journey, and as Perry really alluded to, the very beginning of another one. I'm never going to think in the same way, but it's a beautiful door into what it means to be human, and what it means to live a full life, given that this physical life is just the womb in which we grow, and our full humanity happens with our final breath, when this physical life is finished.
Thank you, Steve. It was awesome to watch Steve pass through a transformation of a weary palliative care physician facing the daunting aspects of COVID, and to see him become a midwife in the palliative care unit, who's able to bring hope and comfort in his 9 to 5, and he is quite a presence. My wife had an accident recently. She was in ER, and so when Steve came to visit her, it was quite funny to watch the alarm in the ER nurses, like, why is a palliative care doctor coming to see Eden? And in fact, what it was is he lit up the room, and it's just who he is. And also she's not dying, so that's good news. I will add that Steve also he got, for his thesis, he won an award. It was the Graduate Studies Award for Research and Excellence. And this happens when a student achieves what would be the equivalent of an A+, or we call it a pass with distinction. And you can't get a pass with distinction unless your thesis is publishable. That's generally how I approach it anyway. And so all of that happened, which is also a good segue to Lisa. If you could do the same and share a little bit about your thesis and what was going on with that. And just to say, she also won this award. So Lisa.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks. So it is so nice to see everyone. I finished the Zoom aspect, I think, of all the school stuff in December of 22. So it's been a while since I've seen everyone in a little window, and it's really nice to just experience it again. And thank you, Perry, for sharing. I think I agree, that was so much of our experience, and the gift that it really was, and such a hard time to be able to meet regularly with everyone. So yeah, thanks, Ellie, for reading out the titles for us. My title, Menstrual Blood, an Icon of the Kenotic Atonement of Christ, a Better Way with Better Blood. And I'll just kind of give a bit of a summary and maybe read the abstract at the end. I think, as Brad, you alluded to, you can't really get through this program without really getting a little bit more in-depth understanding, or at least introduction of what really kenosis is, and this kind of self-emptying concept. And somehow along the way, it came to my mind that, the female body essentially is self-emptying every month for the sake of life. And I just thought, I'd love to explore that. And so that was the beginning of this idea. And it was not something that many people had written about. So it was pretty challenging to find research that would kind of align with what I was wanting to do. So I would say this is a very constructive work. We're taking from a lot of different disciplines, but also medieval thinking, somewhat, contemporary thought, and kind of blending a lot of different ideas together to come up with this. Really centered in feminist theology and body theology. And basically, the goal was to reconstruct or reimagine atonement by accessing the female body and what it may be offering as insights through theology. So I focused on menstruation or menstrual blood as a reimagined symbol of Christ's shed blood, noting that sacrificial blood and most of the other metaphors and analogies used within atonement theories are totally androcentric. And within pretty much each of them, there is a relationality of like dominance and submission. And so it just, the atonement models as they kind of are currently looked at don't really, they misrepresent really the Godhead's relationality. And so exploring this completely different way, where it was almost like subverting all of those ideas and trying to move beyond, was kind of exciting, to be honest. It was fun to recognize that there was new ways of doing it. So generally, I think it was just I concluded that like the cyclical nature of menstruation, the sense that it's regenerative, that it's for life, as well as kind of accessing some of the physical characteristics, a lot of which were dismissed and disdained kind of from the Greeks and the Romans, are the very things that kind of represent almost the relationship of God, the hospitable nature, the welcome of the womb, the absorptive, the inclusion. So it was satisfying, because it felt like taking something that had largely been disdained, particularly in the church and Christian history, dismissed, really repulsed in a lot of ways, the menstruation, menstrual blood, and actually kind of accessing it as a way to bring a new idea forward into how we might think about God, how we might think about relationship, how we might think about reconciliation, in this non-dominant way, but very much more as interconnected with one another. So I have some energy behind it, because I still am passionate about it. I've been sitting with it for about a year and still kind of like, what do I do with this? So I'll just read my abstract and I'll just leave it at that and go from there. For centuries, theologians have sought to understand the meaning and significance of Christ's death. The current motifs and interpretations of the atonement have constrained Christology by situating Christ within a paradigm of domination and subordination. I propose that the inferior, porous, and excessively moist female body, as presumed by Greco-Roman classicists and early Christian writers, expresses the unboundaried, mutual, and self-giving relationality of the Godhead. Christ's blood, represented by menstrual blood, reveals divine love as for the empowerment and flourishing of others, bringing reconciliation to divine human relationships, invoking the remembering of menstruating bodies, and supporting the healing of human other relationships. Menstruation is an embodied icon of the kenotic atonement of Christ. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. One of the real joys for me was watching this, like from the inception, where Lisa almost, I could be wrong, but Lisa sounded almost hesitant to even raise the idea because it seemed too crazy. And the moment she did, the top of my head blew off, and I thought, this is going to be like awesome. And then to see you take it from a crazy idea into deep level research. So we look forward to publishing it. Hint, hint. Send me a message. So again, we're grateful to all who could join us today. I'm so thankful for these beautiful talks that LA gave, and Perry. We're really enthusiastic about the kind of outcomes that we heard from Steve and Lisa. I want to just give a little opportunity if there's anything others of the graduates would like to leave us with. And so I'm just checking my screen. Krista, it was good to have you as part of this, and we're grateful that you could bring it in for a landing this semester with Walter's help. And do you have any, I hate to put you on the spot, but I don't hate it that much. So Krista, is there anything you want to share by way of greetings or parting shots?
No, I appreciate what Perry said about like the bedrock of history and the wide breadth and depth of what this degree has done. I've done, the 2-year degree over 6 years, and it just has given me a chance to interweave it into life as well, which has been rich and interesting in all of the different strange seasons I've walked through in the last while, but it has been, yeah, an anchoring and imaginative, expansively imaginative as well. So I was happy to end just last Friday, handing it into Walter and barely making it to this deadline, but I did. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Krista. And by the way, like, I think you all know this now, the course is designed this way, that it's meant to serve the student, not vice versa. And so we're we're enthusiastic about people who need to take their time to do it because they're living intense real lives. And so a 6-year plan isn't a bad thing. It's just the right thing for you. So thank you. Sarah, would you like to share anything?
Well, I was just thinking how beautiful it is to see everybody's faces again. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
And Perry, thank you for your address. That was just really fun to remember. I'm remembering the hike that we all went on and just what an incredible 3 years this has been and how it's altered my life. And I'm so grateful for all of you. Walter Thiessen, Peter Fitch, Brad Jerzak, Ellie Henry, David Moore. You guys are Andrew Klager. Thank you for all that you've invested in us. And yeah, it's been a real honor. I don't miss the 3 a.m.s. It's again still dark outside, and I will never miss that again, but I will miss what this has done in my life. So thanks.
Thanks, Sharon. Sarah. I was looking at Sharon's. Sharon Mason is with us. She's one of our dear board members, and I didn't mention her earlier. I'm so glad you could join us today, Sharon. But thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the great hike. I know Sarah from the middle of the night as well, when she and her husband got Brian and Perry and I and others up to go hike Mount Doom in Middle Earth, New Zealand. Carl, anything to share?
Just thanks again to everyone. It's great to see Lisa again. We started together some years ago, and just I'm amazed as always by the interweaving of so many people and so many threads together, but in a common way of going forward. So grateful for everyone and for the transformation in my life. Yeah, hope to find ways to continue to be woven with you over time.
Thank you. It was good to have you at some of our on-site modules too. That there's a special magic about that we're hopeful that everyone can attend at least one or two in the, now that we're post-COVID, even at least those in the continent. Heather, anything to share? If you're still there. Well, she's still on. But she's getting coffee probably. This is kind of a fitting way to wind up. One of the staff I didn't introduce earlier was Jessica Williams. Jessica is both on staff with us and also faculty. So Jess, would you mind sharing what you're up to this summer and this fall with us? And by the way, she was the first one to receive that same award that Lisa and Steve did. But she's had a chance to share about her thesis on St. Macrina before. But for now, like where you're at in the school and in our world.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations. Yeah, I am now working for SSU as the admissions and campus coordinator, which is a change from the last couple of years. I've been working in the undergraduate program. But I came through this program and I'm quite happy, quite pleased to continue to be a part of it. And anything else? No, I'm so inspired by all of you and everything that's been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, Heather's not going to share because she's boarding a plane, which is like just so typical of the realities around the world and of universities like this. But with that, we're going to wind it up. And I just, again, thank you for joining us this morning. This will be recorded and I will get links to you that we can pass around to those who weren't able to make it today. Blessings on you all and have a good day.